Hi, and welcome to this session on what's new in financial management, intercompany postings. My name is Brian, and with me today I have Joshua and Jose, who will tell about the improvements we made to intercompany postings. We made a set of improvements. We've improved the setup so it's easier and hopefully more fail-proof. We've improved the role center, the navigation. We've included bank-to-bank transactions in IC General Journal, and we've added comments in the IC transactions in the in and out box, and we enable you to reject documents even though they are already created. But we'll get into those in a few seconds. For those of you who are not that familiar with intercompany postings, I'll just do a few slides on what it is and what it is that we're trying to achieve when you're running intercompany postings. If you have a business, it could be any of these ones, you will of course have transactions with vendors and customers for buying and selling things. If you are a headquarters and a factory, you may need to charge for internal services. Or if you're a factory and an outlet, you need to sell your products to the outlet. And of course, you'll always have external to your close business partners, external vendors and customers. But if if you're all part of the same group or controlled by the same legal entity, maybe you're separate legal entities, but you're controlled by one, it makes sense to look at the transactions that take place between you, especially if you're all running on Business Central. Because then we can look, it's still sales and purchase transactions, just like any other, but we can maybe automate these transactions if they fit into the scope of what we have in intercompany postings. So just an example of what it will look like when you've set it up and things are working. If I'm in my company here and I have a sales subsidiary that I need to send an invoice, for example, for advertising cost, I will go into invoices. I'll create one for some advertising expenses that I did. In my company, in the headquarters, we want to differentiate between the different kinds of advertising expenses. So I have set up different GL accounts, which make me split out the expense in several parts. I may also want to, on the invoice, to specify that this is for a certain segment of our business. In this case, it's for our office segment, at least in group reference. So I put that dimension on the sales invoice. And then I can post it. It goes to my Nordic sales company. So let's see what happens when I post it. We'll go home and we'll post it. And then we'll ask Joshua how it looks like on his side in the sales subsidiary.
Yeah, so here I am on the sales company. I can see the received purchase invoice. As you remember, Brian just sent us a sales invoice. And it's this one here. So here it's the same two lines that we just saw. Instead, we can see that the advertising expenses that Brian tracked on his company with a different granularity are now here mapped to a single account, the advertising expenses. If one sees also the dimensions, we can see that while on his company he uses business groups to map and to track that invoice, we use production lines in our company. So we use production lines and it's mapped to a different dimension value. So let's see how we changed a bit of this, how we set up these kind of scenarios. So I'll hand it over to Jose to explain how to set up with the new changes that we did.
Thank you, Joshua. So let me walk you through the improvements that we have done to the setup. If we search for intercompany setup, we will now see this page that summarizes all the different setup related to intercompany. First, we see the general section where we will be introducing the different fields that we want to communicate with our partners when we want to represent our company. For this particular example, we will be using the intercompany partner code, as well as the inbox type database, since it allows us to see the new feature synchronization partner. This new feature will allow us to copy the intercompany chart of accounts and the intercompany dimensions from one of our partners, avoiding manual errors when introducing them by hand. Since we're working from the headquarters, we will leave this empty. Below the general area, we have the intercompany partners. Here we will be able to add or modify any existing partner that we would like to communicate through intercompany. On top of that, we make some improvements to companies that have already done part of their setup. We will be auto-completing some of the fields to make it easier for users. The existing behavior for adding a customer or a vendor hasn't been changed for this release. On the right side, we have some queues that will tell us how far into the settings we are and if we are missing any part of the setup that we should be taking on before making any transaction. Finally, on the top, we added some navigation actions that will move us through intercompany chart of accounts and intercompany dimensions. If we go to the intercompany chart of accounts, we will be able to see the functionality that enables us to map financial information consistently between different business entities. We can start creating new entries by hand, or for example, since we are working from the headquarters and we decide that it's the company setting the source of truth for all the different partners, what we did was basically copy from our current existing chart of accounts. Before we explain the mapping, let me show you an example of what we are trying to achieve with intercompany chart of accounts. Here in the headquarters, we assume that we have a granular division for the type of advertisement expenses, but that doesn't make sense for all the other companies. So the decision was to make only one specific IC chart of accounts that we will call advertising expense that other companies can map to their own chart of accounts. How we can see this in Business Central is this action will open a mapping for the different interactions that we have with this intercompany chart of accounts. On the left side, we can see how we want to receive entries that goes through intercompany, and on the right side, how we want to send these transactions that are handled by our company to the other partners in the network. Following the example, here we have a granular description for different types of advertisement expenses with their own corresponding accounts. However, for intercompany, we just agreed to only use one. So now let's look at the intercompany chart of accounts of one of the subsidiaries. In this particular case, we selected the headquarters as our synchronization partner. And then when we go to our chart of accounts that, as you can see, it's empty, we can basically run the synchronization setup. And this will copy the current status of those intercompany chart of accounts for that particular partner into our own entity. Once we have done that, we can go directly to the mapping and select how we want to interact. In this particular case, since the structure for the different chart of accounts are very similar, we can basically use this functionality that does the auto mapping for us. Analogously, we have the intercompany dimensions. That, for example, for the headquarters, it just makes sense to work with an office business type of dimension. However, when we're working with a local store, we would like to have a more detailed description if it comes from if it's meant for a home, professional, or international approach. We have a similar behavior as for intercompany chart of accounts if we move to the intercompany dimensions. Here on the top, we will be able to set the intercompany dimensions, and analogously, we will be able to map those dimensions. It's worth mentioning that the different dimensions have a subdivision inside of them that will allow us to set the mapping for the individual dimension values. So now let's look at the subsidiary sales and how the mapping for dimension is on this particular company. If you go to the IC dimensions and we click on the different mappings for dimensions, we will be able to see that for business group dimensions, we want to map them into production line. The same way when we send something from our production line, we would like to map it to the business group. If we go inside these two areas, we will be able to see that the values inside them are mapped differently. since we want industrial and office entries that are sent from the headquarters to us to be mapped to the Pro dimension, and on the other end, we also want entries that are generated from our production dimension to be sent to industrial. And going back to Brian to explain the other improvements that we have done.
Thank you for the demo, Jose. We also made improvements in the existing feature on how you navigate it. We made it a lot easier to navigate between the in and out boxes if you run a more manual setup, or if you're doing demos, it might be easier. We improved the role center, we added queues, and we included comments, and we enabled rejection of created documents. But Joshua will demo these features for us.
Yeah, so on the scenarios that you have seen, we were automatically sending and accepting the transactions that were happening in Intercompany. So for this scenario, we will disable this, as some companies may want to have a more nuanced control of what they are sending through Intercompany. So you can disable this, and you can also say for this partner, we don't want to auto-accept the transactions. Great, so let's have a look at how the flow works for this scenario. In my headquarters, I can open up a sales invoice. So I'll open up this one. And in here we are requesting to our subsidiary company, well, we're telling them that we have sent them 10 chairs and 3 lamps. Good, so when I post this, it will send the invoice through Intercompany. And the first improvement that we want to show is that we now have here in the queues a queue that is telling you that you have something pending to send. So you can open it, and here it is. You can, of course, add comments to this transaction. Please verify. And we can send it through the Intercompany partner. We have improved the navigation, the transaction that we just sent. We can go to the handle out box and see that here it is, the transaction that we just sent. And we can also navigate to the originating company, the document. So here it is. How does it look on the other side? So let's go to our sales company. Yeah. In our sales company, we will be showing an analogous queue that lets you know that you have something incoming in Intercompany. When you open it, here it is. We can see the comments that we sent. So we can also accept this transaction. Great. So let's go to the document in the same way. So if we go to the handle documents, we see the last purchase invoice that we received. And we can go to the document. This is the purchase invoice that got created out of the sales invoice I sent. Super. So this could have happened, maybe we realized that we actually received 20 chairs instead. So there's a mistake here, and we can let the Intercompany partner know that by rejecting this transaction. What this action will do is that it will delete this purchase invoice and send back a rejection. Yeah. So once we send the rejection, we will see that we have something to send here in our queues, and we can send it. Maybe we can add a comment as well to let them know that you send more chairs. Okay? And it's sent. In the originating company, we will see that transaction has been rejected. So we can open it and see the comments, and yeah, we can verify or do something about it.
That concludes the improvement in navigation and how we visualize the flows. We've also improved a thing we took away when we introduced in 2022 wave one, we introduced the auto accept and auto send for journals. But if you don't have a UI, it's hard to tell you that something might be wrong or you have duplicates because it's all done behind the screen. But now we found a way to introduce it back into the feature so we can actually do duplicate validation for you. Joshua will tell you more about that.
Yeah, so exactly that scenario. I'll explain a bit more how that worked. So when you had two companies and you started in one with a sales order, you can send it through Intercompany and the corresponding purchase order will be created. If the originating company decided to post the sales order, they will end up, of course, with a sales invoice, but they will also send a purchase invoice. In this scenario, the company B has two documents related to the same entity. So we deleted this warning in the auto send, but now we have re-added it, and I'll show you how it looks. So let's go to that scenario. In the headquarters, I'll open up the sales order. And here I have a sales order. I can send it. The document is released. Now, let's say that sometime later we have fulfilled the order and we are ready to post. We can post this order. And at this moment in time, we have sent two documents to Intercompany. They are on our outbooks. So let's go ahead and see these documents. So these are the two documents that we are sending. We can decide to send both of them. Now you will see a warning that says that you have already sent an analogous invoice, and if you still want to do it, you can do so. Analogously, in the sales company, if we see the intercompany inbox transactions, before accepting these two documents, we will see the same kind of warning, so we can go ahead and accept it. And you will be warned as well. Now, if you, by mistake, accepted both of them, or maybe you have auto accept set up, you can go to the transactions you just sent. So we go ahead and say, navigate to the handled inbox. Let's go here and open this document. And we will see also a warning if this was auto accepted. An order with this number has already been received, so you have two documents. And then the user may decide which one to keep depending on the business process that they run. The scenario that enables starting with a purchase order and sending a sales order and posting the sales into a sales invoice and receiving an analogous purchase invoice on the other side will come in 22.1.
Thank you, Joshua. We've also improved the transactions you can do in intercompany general journals to include bank-to-bank transactions. It requires a little setup, but it's a nice little feature to reduce some manual work. Jose will take you through the feature.
Thanks, Brian. So, to allow for intercompany transactions using bank accounts, first we will need to go to the companies that we want to interact with bank accounts and enable these the accounts that we want to use. We can do that inside the bank account, and this toggle needs to be turned on. So now that we have enabled the bank account in our sales, we can go to the headquarters and select which bank accounts we want to use for transactions. We can do so once we have a partner. Here we have an action that will allow us to create new entries if we know the numbers by heart, or if we have selected the option to enable the copy, we can copy them directly, as you can see, this Trust Me Bank. Once we have this setup done, we go to the Intercompany General Journal and create a new entry as we used to. Here we will select our partners, that is the sales company. Let's say that we are gonna make an amount of 55,000, and we want to save this internally in our company in the bank account for check-ins. The new functionality comes all the way to the right. We still have the option to link this to a GL account if that's what we want to do, but we have the option to select a bank account now. If we go and select the Trust Me Bank, we can just directly post this entry. And now if we see the sales company, we will be able to see this entry that was automatically accepted in the Intercompany General Journal. As you can see, there are two entries that one of them is linked to a bank account. In this particular case, it's one of our bank accounts with all the information that we want. And we can post it directly and will be saved directly to our bank account, as we can see here. As we can see here for the Trust Me bank account, if we go to the balance, this operation was automatically done for us, and we don't need to do anything besides selecting it in the sender part of the transaction. I'm going back to Brian.
Thank you. So a lot of improvements to Intercompany, a setup to make it easier to have it all in one place, and hopefully because you have it all in one place, do fewer mishaps or gaps when you're doing the setup. Improvements to role center and navigation, the bank-to-bank, and the rejection of created documents, as well as a duplicate check, one of them coming in the next minor. So that is what we have in this release. For the next release, or for coming releases, we are looking into approvals for IC General Journals. It's one of the top ideas. Another one is the ability, I think it was Jose who turned on the setup for database. So what you just saw in these demos were companies from within a database, but it's very often that you have different environments where you still want to do intercompany transactions, and we are looking into providing that capability. So that will maybe come in the next release or in hopefully a soon to come future release. If you want to engage with us, you can do it on Yammer or Twitter. You can also submit your own ideas, for example, the approvals in IC journals. It's already there, so you just need to vote for it. But if you have other ideas, post them on BC Ideas and tell us what you think, what we should change or improve or maybe add. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed the new improvements we did to Intercompany.